a major conference on goods and freight movement within the Los Angeles area. Over 100 people participated for 2 days. So moving forward ahead together. That is, how do we get goods out of the Port of LA, Port of Long Beach, and distributed throughout the United States? Part of it is the Alameda Corridor. Part of it is the 710 Corridor, which connects to the proposed high desert corridor for freight and logistics between the railroads and the long-haul truckers. So what we're concerned about is how LA City participates within the overall coordination of trucking from our port through the city of Los Angeles and our adjacent communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're joined by Mr. Alarcon. Let's look at the agenda now. Mr. Clerk, as we have this here, we have items 2, 4, 3, check that, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's talk on item number 3 right now.
Very good.
Item number 3 is a CAO report relative to DOT's claiming approximately $5.3 million in TDA Article 3 fund allocations for bicycle and pedestrian facilities for fiscal years 06-07 and 07-08.
And as before you start your report, I want to welcome the chairman of the Transportation Committee. We started a running start, Mr. Rosendahl. We did public comment, and we did items 1 and 2, which is a parking district. Now we just right here on item number 3. So we're right in play right there. Item number 3. Thank you very much, Mr. Rosendahl. Turning it back to you.
Did we do on consent 1 and 2?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it again so that we have all the votes here.
Very good.
1, 2, 3, 4 of us on item 1 and item 2. What did you say, Tom?
And we did item number 1 and number 2, and then we did public comment. Now we just called number 3, so we're going to start with a report right now on item number 3. Clerk, would you call it again for the benefit?
Item number 3 is the CAO report relative to DOT claiming money in TDA Article 3 funds for bicycle and pedestrian facilities for fiscal years 06-07 and 07-08.
How you doing? Give us a quick report on what this is. From my end, it's absolutely necessary, and it's a no-brainer, but I'd like you to make a quick discussion on it.
This is a standard report. The CAO report recommends approval of DOT's request to claim and allocate $5.3 million in TDA funds. The city receives TDA funds through the county from the state from a percentage of state sales tax on gasoline. These funds are specifically provided to agencies for bicycle and pedestrian projects.
Now, I have a bunch of quick questions. Was this report brought to the attention of the Bicycle Advisory Committee?
Yes, it did.
And the advisory committee concurred with recommendations?
I haven't heard any. I asked them if they have any comments or questions. They haven't responded yet.
They haven't responded. A large portion of this money is being spent on the San Fernando Valley Bike Path. Why is the TDA money being used as opposed to other sources of funding?
This project is about $12 million in total cost. We have grants through MTA called for project about $7.5 million. And we're short about $4 million that we're using TDA to fill that gap.
Yeah, I know that one of my colleagues does have a problem with that. He's not here at the moment.
It's okay if you miss school.
How will the $530,000 for the bikeway program be spent?
Mostly on bike lane projects, bike-friendly streets. These are typical projects we spend that bikeways money on.
Very good. Is any of the $86,000 being transferred from active projects?
No. These are all future allocations.
How will the funds be used for the bicycle parking project?
It has a line item for bicycle parking too in the allocation. It's on the list. About $200,000, I think.
What about the safety and education project? What specifically will those funds be used for?
We use it for safe moves for bicycle and children's safety education program. About 5% of TDA funds can be used for safety education.
Very good. We have one public comment card, Glenn Bailey.
I'd like to say something afterwards.
Good afternoon. My name is Glenn Bailey. I am chair of the City of Los Angeles Bicycle Advisory Committee. I was copied on the report. It was sent on the day of our August meeting, and didn't realize we'd still have time to weigh in at our next meeting. But I think that there should be at some point in time a conversation. This may be the only time that it triggers that conversation of the cost benefit of how much money we spend on bike paths versus other types of projects. The bike paths are multi-million-dollar projects per mile versus how many miles can we get in putting bike lanes, for example, down throughout the city to implement the bicycle plan. Specifically, and I know the need for the San Fernando project, and I've been following it for a long time, recently wrote it, the part that exists, and I guess my concern in terms of, again, cost-benefit was, you know, San Fernando is a very challenging street for pedestrians and cyclists, and that's really shown by the use on the path largely by families of pedestrians, which makes it less usable by cyclists because there are groups of people walking on the bike path. So I think one of the items of discussion needs to be, it seems to me, how we can design things so that cyclists can safely use bike paths and pedestrians be able to use them and both coexist without those issues. The other issue that's been raised, and I don't know the answer, and maybe Councilmember Alarcon would know, is the high-speed rail project that is looking at this alignment in terms of how that's going to impact the city's investment in the future of this entire project and the amount of monies that we have already invested and are going to be investing in the future. And I haven't gotten a good answer on that impact yet.
Thank you. Stay there. Mr. Labange.
Mr. Alarcon, the district representative.
Do you want to go?
Well, I think Mr. Bailey's raising all kinds of questions that are concerning, I'm sure, Mr. Cardenas and myself. What I can say is that, notwithstanding what Mr. Bailey has said, it's heavily used. The portion that is completed is heavily used by the community, and so there is a benefit to it. But there is a conflict between the pedestrian use, which is very high, and the bicycle use, which is very low. So we do have to. I believe some of that will be mitigated just by the extension of the bike path. Because there are no connectors to the existing bike path other than the normal streets. So I believe as they extend the bike path, bicyclists will be more inclined to use it. But I think we do have to make it more pedestrian, bicyclist user-friendly. And I don't have a specific answer for you. It's a question that I've mentioned to my staff. With regard to the high-speed rail is a long-term project, and whatever they take away, we're going to fight to make sure that they give back. So if they take the bike path in some kind of eminent domain process, then we will want to make sure that there's a bike path to replace it. But there are frankly much larger issues related to the high-speed rail in terms of its takings. I don't think. It's a difficult question because people are saying, why invest in something now that may be taken away in a few years? I think the high-speed rail is a 10-year project for completion. I'm not exactly sure when the impact on the bike path would be, but there's going to be much greater impacts when the high-speed rail comes. These are very good questions. They're legitimate. We should deal with them. In fact, I don't know what kind of high-speed rail committee we've got in the city, but I think we should put together some kind of citywide citizens advisory committee relative to high-speed rail.
I agree with that, Mr. Alarcon. But I would like you to take a meeting with Mr. Bailey. He's quite a leader and a remarkable fellow on this, so that some of the questions he just raised can be done as we go forward with this project. Do I have a motion to move forward with it?
Sure.
So moved. Second, Mr. Koretz. And Mr. Labange, I know, is in favor of it as well. So it's unanimous among the committee to move forward with this. And thank you. And I look forward to the results of the meeting with Mr. Bailey. Okay, folks, I'd like to, with colleagues' permission, because I know we have to shuttle back and forth, that we could go to, real quickly, if it works,
6, 7,
number
8.
5.
5, okay, 5.
Okay.
Item number 5 is the city attorney report relative to the prevention of harassment of bicyclists in the city of LA.
Okay, I have 2 cards on this, Ted Rogers and Ross Herson. Could they come up to, and before staff gives a report, real quickly make their comment, and then we'll move forward with this. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon. Did we say what you already did that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to thank you first.
Name, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ted Rogers. I write bikinginla.com, and I'm on the board of the LACBC.
Sure.
I want to thank you first for the support that this committee has given to bicycling in recent years. I don't feel like I have to tell you the problems that cyclists face on the streets because you already get it. This committee understands. The key to this anti-harassment proposal is that when someone does something to a bicyclist, there's never a police officer there to witness it. They don't do it if they see a cop there. This gives cyclists a chance to defend ourselves. Only option we've had for self-defense in the past is words, gestures, or confronting a driver. And when you confront a driver, you're on a bike, he's in a 2,000-pound car, you know who's going to win, as Dr. Thompson has shown us. This measure will give us the opportunity to fight back, to defend ourselves, and when we have that, it will act as a deterrent to drivers so that these incidents will be far less likely to happen. By passing this, it may seem like a small thing, but you will save lives. And that's all I can ask of you.
Thank you very much for that comment. And when I spoke about this before a whole group of cyclists, they just applauded wildly. It was a no-brainer. And frankly, this came about after I met a gentleman who had been left on the side of the road, and I'll never forget how he looked and what he had to say. So I appreciate that, sir. And Glenn, come on up as this gentleman leaves.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Let me come before you, Ross Hirsch, Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Let me come before you wearing 2 hats here.
Sure.
Helmets is probably more appropriate. I'm a cyclist. I ride to work. I ride with my kids on the weekends. And I've been hit. I've been chased down. I've had stuff thrown at me. But I also am an attorney. And I advise cyclists. I handle bike cases. And I get calls very often from cyclists on what should I do in the event of this injury or this collision that I've been involved in. And you know what I have to tell them very often? You're out of luck. You just don't have damages that are enough for me or any other attorney to be able to take up this case and make it worth anybody's while. So I'll advise them, sometimes in the back channel, sometimes helping them out because they've got damages. But it shouldn't take a catastrophic loss or death even for someone to be able to seek redress for a legitimate collision. So that's why I think the city attorney's proposal, which I've only seen sketched out, and I believe the same thing that you folks have seen, which is the 2-page report. So I'd like to see what the legislation is proposed and how it shapes up. But I think it's important. What they acknowledge in their letter is that the laws aren't being enforced. They just can't. It's an issue of limited resources. And so creating a private right of action, I think, is important. They do it all the time in environment law. I do environment law as well. Prop 65, the Safe Water Drinking Act, Clean Water Act, they all have citizen enforcement provisions. So it's done, it's quite often commonly done. A couple things I'd like to see incorporated in the statute, just a few things. I'd like to see a civil penalty. I'd like to make sure that that's incorporated in there, payable either to the cyclist or the government. I'd also like to see a mechanism designed to trigger the insurance of the driver, because sometimes these people will be left. These are tough times, and a lot of people don't have a lot of excess cash. And last thing I'd like to add is the recovery of attorney's fees, which will incentivize folks to seek out people like me and seek out other attorneys to address these legitimate compensation
Hold there
issues.
for a second, Judy. Does that make sense?
Well, certainly we recommended the recovery of attorney's fees, and we think that would we agree that would provide an incentive for people to be able to seek redress when, fortunately, they haven't been catastrophically or seriously injured. If council requests, you could request a minimum civil penalty. Some of the statutes, we have other city statutes that create causes of action and allow for an award of attorney's fees. Some of them have allow for damages or payment of, the ones I've seen are $250, whichever is greater. So they do have a minimum amount if in fact damages can't be proved. I don't think we could trigger a requirement that anybody use insurance or have insurance. I think that's preempted by the state, and none of our statutes that do create causes of action require anybody to use insurance in defending themselves. But we certainly agree with the recovery of attorney's fees, and again, the issue of civil penalty, I believe, is a policy decision for council to make.
Would you recommend that?
It would be consistent with the other statutes that the city has.
And what would you recommend? I know we're doing it right here in the room at the moment.
Well, I can tell you the ones I've read are $250. I can go back and see if that's a common amount.
Makes sense. What? $250, colleagues?
I have a question. How does it equal other moving vehicles or anyone in the public street? I think it should be equitable across, whether it's a vehicle, a truck, a bus, a pedestrian. If we want to have equity, let's bring it across the board on anything that would. I think government works best when there's the most widest area that covers everybody. So as the public comment, do you ride down Sunset Boulevard?
I do every day. I've seen you out there a couple
you
times.
At Sunset and Lucille one time?
That was you.
Leave me your card. I recognize your hat there. I think there. On this issue here, though, I think it's important to have, so it's not complicated to the courts or whomever, because I think there will be a need to focus on this, just like in traffic court, on issues that relate to these emerging opportunity for people to use alternative transit. So that's the only thing I'd ask our city attorneys to look at it, so there's consistent. If I do something to you in a car-to-car, whatever that is, it should be equal if it's a car-to-bike, bike-to-person, or whatever the case may be. You know the law. So,
Council member, I'd like to make actually 2 points. The first is that although we're talking about cars harassing bicyclists, this isn't limited to people driving cars. It would also be come into play, for example, if you had someone standing on a street corner and a bicyclist rode by and they threw a rock at him and screamed, "I hate bicyclists." Sure. So it would be comprehensive in that sense. We were asked to come back with a report with a recommendation about how to prevent or discourage the harassment of bicyclists in the city, because it was council, in adopting this motion, apparently believed that there is a problem of bicyclists being harassed in the city, and that appears to be borne out by the testimony that council has heard. If council believes that there is a problem with people driving certain sorts of trucks or cars, if they believe that they're a target of harassment and there needs to be legislation targeted to that, we will certainly consider it and come back with a report. But our recommendation was in response to the council's report about how to prevent the harassment of bicyclists in the city.
please.
Mr. Chair, I think if somebody spits at a car, I don't think there's much danger of somebody being hurt. If somebody throws a plastic Coke bottle at a car, that's not going to cause much damage. But if somebody throws a plastic bottle at a bicyclist and causes them to lose their balance, there's a severe threat of injury. I've seen people honk their horns right behind a bicyclist. If you honk a horn at a car, I mean, it could freak you out, but it's not going to cause you to crash, usually. I mean, 100 times out of 101. But if you honk right behind a bicyclist, you could make them jump off their bicycle. And so I think it should be a severe fine. It's something that will catch the attention. We also have to get some media exposure behind it so that the public is aware of it, because we want to prevent this. We don't want people to violate it. So I think it should be at least $1,000.
Okay, and again, Councilmember, this is...
But I want to say...
Policy call for council, this is different than a fine. If somebody commits a moving violation and they're cited by the police, then there is a fine that is imposed. And so what we're talking about here is there a minimum amount of damages that an individual who's riding a bicycle can recover?
Yeah, so just the fear alone is worth $1,000. What I first I should have said that I like the way the city attorney analyzed this and the suggestions you make. And I believe we should create a civil process. The district attorney is not going to pick up the bulk of these cases, or unless somebody gets seriously injured, they're not going to take them. And so if we're going to have an effective message, this provides a process to do that. But I still think that the dollar amount needs to be significant, and so I would recommend $1,000. I make it a motion then.
I'll second it. Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with everything that Mr. Alarcon just said. I think $250 is too low, and any of these violations is pretty dramatic and traumatic. So starting at $1,000 seems reasonable to me. I don't know whether we want to add to that for successive cases, because if you do it once, it's one thing. If you ever get caught twice or three times with this, you're obviously not getting the message.
Councilmember, if I might, that might be reflected, again, if the statute were to authorize an award of punitive damages. And so, and many of our statutes do, and I would certainly put that in the draft. And so if someone has done this before, that comes out during discovery, and that would be reflected if it were appropriate to award a punitive damage.
Very good. So let's just hold that for a second and let Mr. Bailey speak, and then we'll continue among ourselves, colleagues, before we take action. But I just want to thank Ross for your comments and appreciate the suggestions you made that we are obviously taking seriously.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
All
you
the
very
councilmen.
much. Go for it.
Thank you. Glenn Bailey. I'm chair of the City of Los Angeles Bicycle Advisory Committee. On this issue, we have had it before the full committee, specifically this issue regarding civil ability for a cause of action for harassment. The Bicycle Advisory Committee voted unanimously to support this action in the city attorney's report here. Let me just say, I don't know of a single bicyclist that hasn't been harassed either with physical objects, which is very, very common, as well as the verbal assaults, which is even more common. And I'm no exception to that. Let me just say that this is a different day, and also, you know, there's a lot of young people, children, who are victims as well, and not just on bicycle, but also pedestrians walking to school. I've read that in the Safe Route to School information from some of the schools. It's kind of appalling that children walking are treated like that by motorists. But anyway, secondly, the police department, you know, obviously has other issues that they're dealing with. If we're lucky enough to get a license plate or some type of identification information that would allow a cyclist to pursue civil action on our own and keep it out of the law enforcement category, I think this would be a good option. I think it would also certainly be a inducement for that, hopefully that behavior to be diminished. Lastly, I just want to call your attention on one other item in the city attorney's report with regards to the possible inclusion in the city's legislative program support for a bill to maintain the minimum safe passing distance of, for example, 3 feet. That is in this report as well, and I hope that you'll also, I don't want to detract from this, but I think it's also part of the solution of making a minimum safe passing distance, and that's on the top of page 3 of the report.
I agree with you, and I appreciate you saying that, and made the record stand that Mr. Parks is in the room, so all 5 of us are here for that. Thank you for your comments. Judy, you want to respond to that, as well as I know Mr. Labange has something to say.
Michelle Mallory with Department of
Michelle,
Transportation. We are working with the mayor's office on the 3-foot passing bill right now. We've had preliminary discussions with the California Bike Coalition as well as the LA County Bicycle Coalition with support of the mayor's office. We are in the process at this point of developing language and meeting with LAPD to talk about the language is in it, but it's very specific about providing 3 foot as a minimum safe passing distance between motorists and bicyclists. We are also talking about addressing the bicyclist position in the roadway under CBC 2102. So we're very close. We look like we're going to be going to committee on this within the next month, and we should have some draft language. At that point, we'll be starting to work with legislatures to move it forward.
Appreciate that. We have a real time schedule here because several members have to go to another meeting as well. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, I want to ask a question. Is it legal to ride a bike oncoming traffic?
I'm sorry?
Is it legal to ride oncoming traffic?
No, it is not.
If you honk your horn, if someone was coming at you, would you then be, how do you deal with that? And many people are riding into traffic.
Councilmember, it violates the vehicle code to honk your horn for reasons other than safety. And
okay, I got that. So you answered the question, so that's a safety issue.
Yes.
Is it legal to give half a peace sign?
Excuse me? Oh, to give half the peace sign?
Right.
Yeah, I believe it is. If I can, the proposed ordinance would not make actions that are currently legal unlawful. Okay. If you see a group of bicycle riders riding by, I believe you have a First Amendment right to yell, I hate bicycle riders. That, we're not making anything that's lawful unlawful. What this would do is take actions that are already unlawful but hard to enforce, and we're creating a different remedy.
I'm not going to. Here's the next question, because I care about safety, and I was on the MTA board, which I'll sit on tomorrow. And one time we had a horrible case where a USC student driving on Adams Boulevard eastbound rode into the street and didn't make it across the street, turned into the bus. Many cyclists now use our sidewalks, right, Michelle? You encourage people to ride bicycles, and it's legal to ride on sidewalks, except
it is not
unless
illegal. We do not encourage them to ride on sidewalks. But
they do.
Yes, they do.
So now, what do you encourage them when they hit an intersection? What are they to do when they get to an intersection? Are they to stop or ride into it?
But we generally tell cyclists that if they feel they must use the sidewalk to ride at a walking pace around pedestrians and use extreme caution when entering the intersection.
Okay, because many people are doing it blindly, and I'm worried about that. So I want to bring that to your attention as the bike coordinator. Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl.
Are you sitting on the MPA board tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yes.
Are you now a member?
I think for tomorrow.
For tomorrow?
Right, but that's not on the agenda today, so we can't talk
You
about
just
it.
mentioned it, so I mean, public comment, so.
Very good, very good. I got that there.
Okay, great. Okay, so you understood what we just said. Now
I
maybe.
believe there was a motion, Councilmember, to establish a minimum amount of damages in the amount of $1,000, and there was a second to that motion.
Okay, so we'll do two things here. First of all, on that motion, is there any comment, or can we vote on that? Go ahead. All right, all those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. On this issue, sure, go for it. You certainly have a chance to ask questions, but I don't want any of these council members leaving for their next meeting until we do the food trucks. Okay.
Let me just ask, so I understand the issue of the administrative process. How is it enforced, and what is the adjudication part of it? Who does that?
This would be enforced by way of a civil lawsuit. Right now, people can sue civilly if, for example, they're on a bicycle and someone assaults them. And what they can do in that case is sue them. And what they'll be able to do if this is enacted is to sue them. The difference is that there will be slightly different remedies. There would be a minimum amount of damages if the motion passes. There would be the plaintiff, if successful, would be able to obtain an award of attorney's fees. And that would make litigation possible or feasible in those cases where there aren't catastrophic or serious injuries.
Would these be the type of cases that would go through a city attorney hearing, or
no?
This is totally outside.
Totally
of that
civil.
process?
This does not involve any city resources, any city enforcement mechanism. This does not involve the city of L.A. So there would be no city administrative hearing.
Okay. As part of the ordinance, is there going to be some explanation? Because some of these words are fairly broad in the sense of threatening, harassing. There's going to be some definition or substance to them?
I'm going to do my best, and if I come back with something that you don't think is adequate, I'm sure I'll be answering for it.
We're going to do something other than just put the words in there.
Yes, it may actually refer to a violation of any federal, state, or local law.
Okay. And then, now, we still have the ability, if something goes on with a variety of these things, we've listed all of the sections. There's still an ability of making a private person's arrest if the officers don't witness this.
Yes, this would be
So
in
that
addition to
doesn't
any other and all remedies provided by law.
And it's basically the person that initiates it is the one that's making the determination that, quote, this violation occurred.
That's right, and the burden under the law would be on the plaintiff to prove that by a preponderance of the evidence.
Okay, and then what is their authority in the sense of stopping someone and they get ID for lawsuits? I mean, how does that work?
They wouldn't have any greater authority than they currently have.
I mean, so if
They would, if it happens to someone, if it's somebody who throws something at them from a vehicle, well then they can get the vehicle license plate number, go to an attorney and see how to develop the case. Maybe they saw the person. It would be handled just like any other civil litigation matter.
1, 2, and 3. Okay, so basically whatever information, so they have no additional authority if no one has an obligation to tell them who they are?
Correct.
I mean,
Unless they're driving a vehicle and they cause an accident, then the laws that are in place currently, you have to provide it. But this does not impose any additional obligations or requirements on anyone.
but many of these things appear to be short of an accident. We're talking about harassment, or I'm assuming threatening language, or whatever those things are.
Cutting
I'm just trying
people
to
off,
figure-
stopping suddenly, throwing objects at them.
So it appears the vehicle license may be the one piece of information that they can gather.
Correct. That's visibly apparent.
All right, thank you.
I appreciate those questions too, Mr. Parks. So we have a motion before us to make the fine $1,000, and we also have the overall motion, which is to prepare an ordinance and bring it back. And we have seconds for that. Colleagues, are we all in favor of this? Unanimously. Thank you so much, and thank you for public comment on making this happen. We're making a major stride today, I can tell you that, on cycling by moving this forward, and I appreciate, colleagues, all your support on that. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Labange for a minute. I have to meet with somebody in the hallway, and we're going to be talking about 6, 7, and 8, the food truck issue.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the city attorneys to come to the table. Item number 6, will you read that into the record, Mr. Clerk?
Ms. CLA. 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah.
Item 6 is a CLA report relative to the regulation of mobile food trucks. And item 7 is a Laban-Koretz motion requesting that DOT, Building and Safety and Public Works, Fire Department and Police Department and the county report relative to the creation of specially designated parking zone for catering trucks. And item 7 is a Laban-Koretz motion directing DOT with other departments and the council offices and city attorney to prepare a recommendation for restricting catering trucks and parking meters in commercially zoned areas.
Yeah. Okay, if we could here, we take all these at once?
Yeah, we have a CLA report that was written generally in response to all 3 of these motions. I can give a quick review of that, and then we can hear public comment.
Give a quick review, and then we're going to go to public comment. I'm going to give 1 minute for public comment. If you need a little more, please take it.
Okay,
Maria.
the CLA report was prepared, again, in response to these 3 motions and at the direction of the committee at the August 11th meeting. We've met several times with the stakeholders, city attorney, county health department to talk about the variety of issues, specifically concentrating on parking issues related to catering trucks. In general, we felt that a permitting process should be established through the Bureau of Street Services, and to that end, we have a list of recommendations on page 3 of the report. The first one is requesting the city attorney, in coordination with the CLA and Street Services and other departments, to develop an ordinance establishing a mobile food truck permit process. Recommendation number 2 is instructing LAPD and DOT working with city attorney to conduct a training program for police officers and parking enforcement personnel so that it's clear what the existing laws are pertaining to catering trucks. Item 3 is instructing DOT to report on the current policy related to limiting the issuance of parking citations to 1 per vehicle per day. Recommendation number 4 is requesting the city attorney to prepare and present the necessary implementing ordinance for the new LA County mobile food truck grading plan that I think you've read about in the press recently. And item 5 is directing the CLA to establish and continue the mobile food truck task force, which is comprised of all the stakeholders listed there.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call the comment here. Michelle Grant, Paul Servano, and Peter Barrett, and Leigh Ross. Forgive me. Hi, Michelle.
Thank you for this meeting today. Just in comment to the report that was written by the committee, one of the things that, as I'm Michelle Grant from the Grilled Cheese Truck, Chief Executive Officer of the Grilled Cheese Truck, what I think as a vendor, as a food truck vendor out on the road, one of the things that I think would really be very, very helpful is if the city could provide new vendors and even the people who are out there with some sort of a one sheet that describes what the actual regulations that currently exist are, and in addition to also educating the officials who are out on the road and are coming and trying to enforce the regulations, make sure that everything is current and up to date, and making sure that everybody's on the same page. I think that that's been one of the things that has been one of the biggest problems that we've seen.
Thank you very much. Paul?
Just for the committee's information, that is reflected in recommendation number 1.
Does everyone get a copy of the recommendations? You got a copy, Michelle?
I did.
Okay, good. Paul?
Paul Scrivano. I think we need to start with a bit of semantics first. As it pertains to mobile trucks, I have no problem, which is a truck designed to go from underserved area to underserved area, job site, industrial park, where there are no existing dining choices. But what we have now are basically temporary restaurants with the expressed and documented purpose of loading up and going to a high traffic area around high rises where there are many existing brick and mortar choices and setting up shop there for hours and hours at a time. Number 2, there's a equal protection, which I basically fear the most, which is I'm not allowed to just set up tables and chairs as a brick and mortar on the sidewalk. I'm not allowed to just park a car out in a parking space and open up my trunk and start selling ribs out of the back of my trunk. But the temporary restaurants, the food trucks get to park and perform commerce on the public right of way. The health issue's already been addressed by county.
Just finish your statement.
Real quick, I see a snowball effect. One truck turns into 7, turns into 10, turns into all sorts of retail stores, and not just food. There's a liability issue. City's not responsible for the sidewalks in front of my restaurant. I'm responsible for it. We've got hundreds of people clamoring. Finally, the signage issue. I just can't put up any sign I want on my business. I certainly can't put a billboard up on my business. Many of these trucks are completely wrapped, 100% square footage, and some of them now have third-party advertisements on them as well.
Thank you very much. Your name again for the record?
Paul Scrivano.
Got it, Paul. Thank you very much. Peter Barnett? Leigh Ross? Okay, good. Got that. Thank you very much. Matt Geller? Okay. You don't want to say anything? Okay. Val, and help me, Val. Bahe?
That's right.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Bahe Karapian.
Karapetian, yes.
Aaron Glenn? Jed Faulkner? Okay, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Vahe Karapetian, and my business is located between Avalon and Central on Slauson, 750 Slauson and 762. I mean, in that location, 36 years already, to manufacturing mobile food trucks. And 100 families are depending on my plant where we're manufacturing those trucks. And we have next door commissary, which is Slauson Food. Around 400 families are dependent from there. They're employed in the same location. And I'm over here to bring your attention and consideration. That's all I'm trying to explain, some details which could help you. And we are, of course, generating a lot of taxes. I will tell you about this. 7 commissaries are existing in Los Angeles City, and which is approximately 6,500 people depend from that. And all this related to land loans which complain or whatever they do, I don't know details. I just try to bring your attention, all those minor detail things and your consideration. I'll appreciate that. That's all it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's very good. State your name for the record.
Jed Palker from the Venice Neighborhood Council Board of Officers. On Monday, we met and came up with two sets of recommendations, both on valet parking and food trucks, because both issues severely impact Venice. You received this morning the materials in email. I have hard copies of them for you if you like. Food trucks for Venice have been on Abbot Kinney, a flashpoint. Actually, that's exacerbated an already existing problem that's existed for over 2 decades or 3 decades, depending on how far you count. We have such impacted parking by just sheer lack of parking, grandfather parking, and valets who have to park on streets because they don't have real places to park. But we've also worked in informal discussions with the various businesses and the food truck coordinators to try and find places for food trucks. In that regard, on number 5 of the recommendations of the CLA, we would very much like to be involved in the process going forward.
Thank you very much. Aaron Glenn.
Hi, Erin Glenn, Chief Executive Officer, Asociación de Loncheros. I just want to thank you for involving us in this process, and we want to continue working with you. I think we should still continue working in the task force as long as we possibly can to reach a comprehensive solution, and so that's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Elias Abar, is that correct? Elias? Okay, good. And Marilyn? Alfranco? Or Madeline? Yeah, you need. No. You can get it all in one. You can do it all in one.
Madeline Alfano, Maria's Italian Kitchen. I'm also the president of the California Restaurant Association. Hello to you all. Of the LA chapter. We're collaborating with the mobile food trucks. They are restaurants on wheels. We are starting a special division of the California Restaurant Association to work with the mobile food trucks. We've been doing this for years in terms of understanding our relationship with the health department. I myself am actually purchasing a mobile food truck because I think it's a great way to bring Maria's Italian Kitchen to areas that don't have a Maria's Italian Kitchen. Pacoima, East LA, El Segundo. We have permits in all of those areas, incidentally. So what we would like to do is find a way to collaborate. They're not going away. They are a new source of business. They are a new source of business revenue, and the customers do like it. We don't want to compete with the brick and mortar restaurants. We agree that that's not an option. Do not park in front of a brick and mortar restaurant, but we've got to come up with some way where they can park somewhere and do this. It's not going away, and we're really hurting business if we don't do that. So Michelle has a great sort of a one sheet, and I know you're going to give me the hook, but there's a great one sheet that she's already working on from the Grilled Cheese and the Board of Grill Girls. They're restaurateurs. They understand the laws. Terrence Carroll, we work very closely with him. So we want to make it so everyone can make a living, not hurt others. So we've got to rework some of these suggestions, but I don't have time to talk about that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, Bill. Now that completed the public comment on this here. On this particular report, could I have city staff at the center table? And I'm going to give it back to Mr. Rosendahl now. Thank you. And we'll start with number 6, the definition just on Zion. We'll go Zion's motion, 6, and then go the other one.
Yeah, sure. Take us through where we're at on 6, 7, and 8. 6 is obviously the Zion Smith requesting the city attorney report regarding court decisions and so on, and 7 and 8. But just take us through.
First of all, the current ordinance on the book, 80.73 in our LA Municipal Code, has been challenged successfully twice in court. And so we do think that if the city wants to get its arms around this burgeoning industry that is the food truck industry, that the better course of action would be to repeal 80.73 and to go with a permitting system that will allow the city flexibility to embrace the good aspects of the mobile food industry and help them grow, but also ensure that the city's public safety issues and traffic laws are addressed and those concerns are taken into consideration.
So, Councilmember, I believe on the reports regarding the prior litigation over this matter, we made those verbal reports during our last presentation here.
I got a series of questions, if I could. First, Amir, I want to thank you for all your leadership on the cabbie issue the other day. That was terrific. What you've done and your staff, the whole city was great. Okay, this is the permit system. What are the city attorneys and boss staffs to talk about this? What are the various problems associated with the mobile catering trucks? What are the problems?
Well, I know some of your constituents may have voiced some of the concerns to you. And also, I believe he's still here, but a representative from the LA County Department of Health is here, and he, from the county health perspective standpoint, can address some of the issues around when mobile food trucks congregate in large numbers in a small area. But some of the problems that we've perceived directly on a tour through the district and some of the what they call hot spots, which is areas where food trucks tend to congregate because they're popular either tourist destinations or business venues. And what we've seen is that there is, you know, a catering truck will stay in one location beyond the time limits posted and beyond the meter allocation. And because of that, that causes traffic issues around those high traffic areas. Also, the catering trucks tend to be larger in size than most vehicles, and so often they don't fit within a parking space, so they end up extending out into red zones. And this is particularly problematic where the red zones are at the intersections where they are there to promote visibility of the intersection for pedestrians and other cars. Also, even though there are regulations about mobile food trucks having trash cans, once there gets to be a large concentration of people, that can be an issue as well. But these are just some of the issues that we've seen. And again, County Health has their own series of issues that really come into effect when multiple trucks are positioned you know, sort of ad hoc on in hotspot areas, and people start realizing that the trucks are going to be there, but there are no special event permits taken out, and so these crowds generate a lot of needs for bathroom services and hand washing services and trash receptacles, and they sort of overwhelm an area.
And do you think the permit system would deal with this? Is this
Yes.
the value of it?
Yes, the permit system could make allowances for certain special events when maybe there's a demand for a congregation of food trucks, but those special events could then be conditioned on adequate bathroom facilities, hand washing facilities, trash receptacles, and other public safety precautions.
Mm-hmm. Who would be responsible for creating the one-page document that is suggested in Recommendation 1? Who would do that?
Well, you know, our office would be willing to work with street services to put something together to, you know, sort of, when someone applies for the permit would have conditions, and those conditions will be summarized, and we can, the conditions will be in the ordinance, but we can break them out into a one-page handout for the permittees.
Very good. The simpler the better, obviously. What would be the cost for this permit?
Well, under the law, we can only charge for the permit an amount that equates to the city's costs in administering the permitting program. So we would ask Bureau of Street Services, who we're proposing or has volunteered to handle the administrative part of the permitting system, to let us know how many employees they think this they'll need to do this, and figure out how much that costs the city, and then we'll amortize that over the number of permits we're expecting.
Very good. And so what is the role of the LAPD in all this?
Well, the LAPD will have an enforcement role with regard to the permitting. The permitting system, and this is will address a question that Councilmember Alarcon asked last time, which is, under a permitting system, can we make it a misdemeanor if you know, for a violation? And the answer is yes. If you have certain permit requirements for operating a mobile food vending service and you don't comply with those conditions and your permit is pulled and you continue to operate in violation, or basically operate without a permit, that can be considered a misdemeanor. So in that case, could be referred to the LAPD for investigation and our office for prosecution.
You're leading me right into my questions, which is just terrific. On the issues of parking citations, these are for LADOT and LAPD staff, okay? Question, what is the ticket cost of a parking meter violation?
Good afternoon, council members. Amir Sadati, Assistant General Manager, joined with Deputy Chief Christine Mata. The current prices for time limit ticket is $50. The meter is $55. Parking outside the lines, it's $50. The peak hour, $85, depending if it's in an anti-gridlock zone, that's $145. Red zone and other safety infractions are $85. All of those fines are going to go up by $3 due to the approved budget. So I think come December, add $3 to those numbers that I just gave you.
Great. And I have two more questions, colleagues, and then just so you know that what I'm going to hope is we can approve the CLA recommendations and request a report back in 60 days, but we're not there yet. But please explain the longstanding policy in the city of not issuing multiple tickets to the same vehicle.
Hi, Christine Mata.
Hi, Christine.
Okay, Christine Mata, LADOT. Our policy is that we don't issue the same violation to the same car.
Yeah.
We can issue multiple violations to the same cars. For example, they can get a meter citation and then get the time limit citation, and then if they're there beyond the peak hour, they can also get a peak hour. So we can do that. However, we don't issue the same violations, so they won't get multiple time limit citations if they remain there.
Yeah, somebody else is asking a question. I know Mr. Labange is interested in this as well. Is instead of multiple tickets for these trucks that continuously violate the parking law, can we issue higher fines for the chronic offender, and can the department report back on that matter? What about that?
Yeah, actually, I believe we implemented that for through an ordinance for our overnight parking districts. The first fine was at, I believe, $100, the second fine, so you have a graduated fine. So we don't have any problem working with the city attorney and see if that's possible, but it would take changing the ordinance, because currently we don't have that. But
Would you recommend that?
I do want to caution, again, this is within parking enforcement. Parking enforcement is issued to a vehicle or license plate. We don't know that person or what. So, and the law can't be for, again, a special group of vehicles. So when a ordinance is enacted for time limit, then you're talking across the city of Los Angeles for everybody. So if a person parks in a 1 hour zone and has been ticketed, and now you want that person, to get a second. So it's not specific to a specific group of vehicles. You're changing the ordinance for all.
Mr. Parks and Mr. Koretz, I know have two meetings at the same time, so if I could let them go before it's okay with you. Fine. First, Mr. Koretz.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions that I'm not sure this totally resolves. Although I like the higher fees. One of the things I was thinking we should take into account, if possible, is the difference between someone being not present and someone being present and unwilling to move their vehicle. So I think it would be a completely different ticket for these food trucks, because you could actually hand them a ticket and say, if you're not out of here, we'll be back in 15 minutes and write you another one. Whereas for most parking violations, they're not aware of their violation, they're not present, and so we could handle that differently. Is that something that would be possible?
Councilmember, it's certainly something that we would look into. One issue with parking violation amounts is that the state law requires that the amount for a parking ticket be the same, if possible, with other cities in the same county. So we're sort of limited in our ability to increase these things over time or for multiple violations. However, through a permitting system, we may be able to have sort of different types of penalties and more severe penalties for people who chronically violate the city's parking regulations.
So they prefer it, or we have to do it?
No, we have to. If it says that if to the extent practical, I believe it says the city's fines have to be the same as those of other cities in the same county.
And if you recall, during the budget, the department provided, along with the CAO and CLA, the fines and the tables for all the surrounding cities around us, and we're at the very top.
So, and so we actually think that one of the advantages of a permitting system is that it gives us some flexibility to try and get a handle on people who chronically violate the city's parking and traffic laws by means other than simply a fine. If it, for example, were to jeopardize somebody's license to do business, if they were chronic repeat offenders, then that would provide a deterrent effect that fines alone don't seem to provide.
Well, so we could say if you have this kind of violation 5 times and you have a permit, we could withdraw that permit.
Correct.
And then the question is, what happens when we catch you doing it without a permit? Can we take your vehicle? What can we do?
Well, no, then you can punish it as a misdemeanor, though, that we're currently not allowed to do. So that's actually a criminal offense. If you engage, if you were to require a permit, it would be a misdemeanor to engage in the business without having a valid permit.
And are we looking at a different method of enforcement? Because right now, there's a lot of willingness to ignore the violations. A vehicle that's too large for its space, poking out in the red, they'll say, oh, we don't want to be that tough on them. They're only a couple feet in the red, and they'll just continue to let them operate. Are we looking at changing the enforcement pattern?
Well, certainly if the Bureau of Street Services were to administer the permitting system, they would actually be enforcing the permitting requirements. And in terms of ticketing vehicles that are violating the city's parking and traffic laws, then, our recommendation is that you work with DOT and LAPD to see that those vehicles that are violating the laws get cited.
That's in some ways the worst problem. I mean, I have some problems that are starting to crop up similar to those in Mr. Labange's district, where there are a couple restaurants that are experiencing multiple trucks parking in front, blocking their visibility and taking all their customers, and eventually likely to put them out of business. And where they have violations, those violations aren't being enforced. The bigger problem in my district is residential. There's some spots, particularly a common hot spot that's been going on for a long time on Beverly Glen, in front of private homes. The people sell there for hours at a time. They leave a lot of trash. They do everything that you possibly could to be problematic. And yet it's in a permit parking district, and our people are not giving tickets to that vehicle. So how do we deal with that piece of it?
Well, Councilmember, Instruction 2 is something that we had worked, not only for us to work with the LAPD on the existing laws, parking beyond the lines, parking in front of a driveway, limits. So that's something that we're going to, as you instruct us, we are going to provide that additional training and provide that input for both residential and the commercial districts. I did not bring the specific block, but I'll be happy to provide you the data if you give me the specific block. But for Councilmember Labange, we did issue 880 citations in one block of Wilshire. We issued 569 citations in one block of Sunset Boulevard. So we have the data. It's all you need to do is ask us, and we'll be happy to provide additional information. Now, in a commercial area, you have multiple parking policies that could be violated. In a residential, there might be only the street cleaning. There might be no other violation there except for, again, somebody may be blocking a driveway or if there's red curves. So in that situation, it is tougher because our officers cannot issue for littering. Our traffic officers cannot litter for people congregating on a sidewalk or the noise issues that you're talking about. So, it is a little bit different, but for the permit parking, I'm happy to provide you that information because our officers are out there. And again, I think I've mentioned this, parking is one peel of this onion, but it's not really the overall solution of this problem. There's other facets to it.
But it's a piece, and in this case, I think I was even told by staff in one of our discussions that because it's far from others and it's not very many vehicles, it's not cost effective to enforce, so they may not actually be able to go out and enforce it. And if that's the case, we need to come up with some other solution to get them to actually respond to a complaint that's a problem, even if we don't profit by that enforcement.
Which again, instruction 2 would help, because now with LAPD resources as well as LADOT resources, you have more resources looking at those types of violations, sir.
So do we think we have enough ideas to implement this to be able to actually get a handle on the problem? Or are there other things we should be looking at, like a space requirement between them, so they have to be at least 200 feet away from each other? I mean, there's some ways.
That's one of the things we could put into the permitting system. We could put limits on the number of trucks in any one block as a condition of maintaining your permit in good order. So, and that's why that's one of the beauties of the permitting system, is it can address multiple issues in one fell swoop.
And can we also charge enough for this permit to be sure we recover all our costs?
Yes.
Our costs
No
of
more than that.
administering.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Mr. Labate. Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Amir Sadati, what is a parking meter space for? And do you have a definition of a parking meter space?
For the record, I do, sir, because you've asked of me many times, so I'll read it into the record. A parking meter is a device used to collect money in exchange for the right to park a vehicle in a particular place for a limited amount of time. Parking meters can be used by municipalities as a tool for enhancing and enforcing their integrated on-street parking policies, usually related to their traffic and mobility and management policies. So that is something I printed out for you, sir, from the encyclopedia. And in addition to that, obviously, it's a tool to provide turnover. One of the main reasons we have parking meters with time limits is, in fact, that there is high demand. There is demand for that parking space, and the businesses require or would like to have customers be able to park, conduct business, and to be able to do that. For long-term employees or people that would like to park and conduct their business in a longer period of time, we have off-street solutions. Obviously, in some areas of the city, off-street could be viewed that we don't have enough off-street, where public off-street, that in those cases, a lot of times...
What if one of these trucks went into an off-street lot and parked in a parking meter space?
I'm sorry, sir?
What if one of these trucks went into an off-street lot and parked into a parking meter space?
For whatever our rules and regulation is, in an off-streets, sometimes we have 1-hour zones, we have 4-hour zones, we have 10-hour zones.
Right.
So the same parking policy rules would apply. So if they stayed there 1 hour and paid for it, that's a legal use of that space.
Right. I want to ask the city attorney some questions. Can you hear this still?
If you use your mic.
Okay.
Here you go.
I got a mic right here.
Okay.
And this picture here is Wilshire Boulevard, right here.
Are you going to cross-examine?
This is Exhibit A. You see that Exhibit A right there?
Yes.
This is a photograph of trucks. Now, you see the tri-light on the corner there? The signal is blocked. If there's an accident there, would the city be liable?
No.
It would not be liable.
No, but we should, when we know about
Have we asked?
circumstances that are, potentially causing injuries to our residents, we should try to do something about it, but we wouldn't have...
Okay, if someone hits their head on the side of a vehicle, would the city be liable?
No, but the truck operator could be liable.
Okay, and also trucks are no longer small, they're very large. This extends over the area there, over the area. Even loading zones, a Coca-Cola truck's not like it once was, or another thing. Have you reviewed your length of loading vehicle zones?
Not recently.
You should as well. Here, this is again blocked. On the issue of public safety, I think there's a lot of issues of height here, and what is the requirement of a vehicle of height as it relates to a tri-light? or a traffic signal?
7 feet high. 7 feet high.
Yeah, how many feet from an intersection?
100 feet.
In that area. Mr. Rosendahl, I read the CLA's report, and there were some things that I did want to get. I don't see any input from the planning department. This is a sea change. Is someone from the planning department here? Welcome. Good to see you. I want to hear what the planning department has to say.
Gabriela Juarez, City Planning Department.
Hi, Gabriela.
And the question was regarding the C-zone parking.
What does the planning department think of this issue? And have you had a conversation?
We've had many conversations. We actually believe that having the food trucks is a benefit to the communities because of the walkability that it provides to neighborhoods and invigorates the sidewalks in a way that we haven't seen in the past. It is not a land use zoning issue for the planning department because our jurisdiction is private parcels, and as such, the parking becomes in the public right-of-way, and as such, we don't have jurisdiction. We do coordinate with the special permits, the temporary use permits, when there's a festival, a farmer's market, or something to that effect that would require a specific time-limited permit for that event, in which case the applicant would be responsible for providing all the necessary health and safety access for restrooms, trash, and what have you, as the city attorney staff has already enumerated.
What about trailers? Because there's a lot of trailers out there as well. Actual trailers hooked to pickup trucks or other vehicles.
Again, if they're parked on the street, that's the public right-of-way in which...
I know, but what do you think about it? You're the city planner. You're trying to create the village.
Right. Whether it's hooked on to something else or not, the effect is that it's creating walkability and people coming out to the street and actually using their neighborhood for more than just a passageway. And so we have always taken the approach that it's a benefit and that it has provided a service, and it has inspired people to come out to the sidewalk and converse with their neighbors as opposed to sitting in a cafe talking to someone half a century away.
Now, what do you mean half a century away?
Well, like in a cyber cafe. You know, people sit in cyber cafes and talk to people cyberly as opposed to actually...
I thought she was picking on me, but that's the last thing I never talk to anybody on that email. I don't even use email or that other stuff on that. I just talk to people, and I do talk to people. Thank you for your comments on that issue there. I have a concern on that the department doesn't look strong enough on identifying locations where there should be parking meters. I truly believe, and I respect the city attorney greatly, that there is a liability to the city on the view if there's a vehicle parked there. And walking in the area of Wilshire Boulevard, Lancheros, if I could use them as an example, are usually downside from a traffic signal and in a one truck location and not in a mass, which then you still have that visibility. They're usually further away from restaurants, and they've been there for 40 years plus in the Wilshire Center, Koreatown area. What we have in the emerging marketplace is a series of trucks, and there's ways to maybe work at it as far as a permit, like we give a permit for a farmer's market, where there would be especially working with the businesses that are there that would encourage some of that, but make sure they're distance away from either a crosswalk or a traffic signal on that particular issue. So I'd really want to see some consideration on that. And I would not like to see them in Atwater Village or Los Feliz Village or Largemont Village or Valley Village in small C1 zones. What's a C1 zone?
In terms of what it allows?
It's the smallest zone.
It's the lowest density of commercial zoning.
Correct.
It has that in terms of height, particularly in uses.
Right. Because if you attach this to density, because Wilshire's density, you could have opportunity in Wilshire, which is meeting a need. But I would not like to see, Mr. Rosendahl, Mr. Koretz, the emergence of this kind of commerce in the smaller C1 zones, in the smaller, what we call villages. Because if we all become mobile, we'll all become cyber. And if we become cyber, then we don't get to meet each other and see the nice smile that you have right there as I tell that to you. I think it's real important to create and protect the village as you look at the village of local planning. And density, makes sense, because that's the people. In talking to the people who are on the Miracle Mile, many of them absolutely love this type of opportunity to eat on the street. They loved it, to eat on the street. That being said, that's a big, big, dense area, and there's a variety of people. I also want to ask the CLA to look into the other 88 cities and see what impact that they have on what the rules are in some of the other cities. Culver City and their city planners did a wonderful job on Washington Boulevard and redevelopment of the art galleries, the Helms Bakery, but they have a harder restriction than us. And I would not like to see a disadvantage, and especially where there's shoulder-to-shoulder borders between Los Angeles and other cities. Because what will happen, and I worry about, and I respect everybody, absolutely everybody in this room, but what will happen unless we define this correctly, there'll be an emergence of a mobile commercial society that will take advantage of the city's weakness to be a strong enforcer. We are a fair enforcer. We're not a strong enforcer. And what will happen is when some team wins the championship, there'll be a T-shirt truck out there. Someone will sell DVDs out of trucks, and it will emerge on and on and on. So I want to make sure we do it right, that we find the spots. I would like to identify locations in the Wilshire area that I think would be appropriate and work with the various organizations. I'd like to identify to make sure they're safe. I'd like the health department to be able to voice their concerns, that we know that. So I think there's a little more study that we'd like to do. We made great progress here, but I think it should be done. And also the issue that Mr. Koretz has, which is quite impactful when there's an overconcentration. A need is being met, but there's not a defined location for that. So I got to look at the zoning issue on what it means. I do want to ask the city attorney's office to look again, because if we allow someone to do something and someone gets in an action, they could say, we have an Exhibit A on this day, that Exhibit A was presented and said this blocks somebody. What responsibility we have to take it? So if we could maybe have another 30 days to work with everybody, 60 days, whatever the time frame is, let's say 60 days, to really work with somebody. I want to define locations. I want to make sure everybody feels they're being included in this. And also the farmers market permit process, because there's a building in my district, 5900. There's the largest concentration of pieces of the Berlin Wall that are there. That particular owner wants trucks there. So I want those trucks to be there, because the owner wants them there until he rents out his bottom floor and he gets a restaurant in there, but he wants them there now. And that being said, I want to make sure we could get, let's say, a permit like we do for the farmers market. Right. And you, of all, are a great champion of farmers market, and you talk about the human experience of meeting people, which gets back to Ms. Juarez's statement about the cyber, whatever it is, space.
Okay. What we're going to do from Mr. Labange's point of view is please incorporate his discussions in this as we go forward when you report back in 60 days with possibly where we need to go. This is a work in progress to everybody in the room, and we will take more time to make sure that we get the handle on it right. Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd ask staff to take the time to do this economic analysis, but the fact is, if we let this go unregulated and we just continue moving in this direction, I think we're going to have a tremendous negative impact on our economy and our revenue in the city. As we start to put restaurants out of business, as we start to have, as Mr. Labange said, other kinds of businesses sell on a mobile basis on our streets, we start to lose a lot of sales tax, we start to close down more retail establishments. So I see a potentially very negative implication, and I hope that we take that into effect without having to study it and quantify it. I think we can anticipate it without that and hopefully respond.
And council member, these remarks aren't directed to you, but just to remind the committee that we are allowed to regulate. The vehicle code allows us to regulate mobile food vending as to time, place, and manner for the public safety. And so while mobile food trucks may have a an impact on the revenue stream of brick and mortar restaurants, that will not be a basis upon which to regulate. So all of the regulations, if council does want to have a permitting system and impose regulations via a permitting system, they will have to be for the public safety. Public safety, however, is broadly defined, and it does include traffic considerations. So that's just something that we would
Can I just mention one thing? In our city's history, we divided a strong purpose in the planning aspect before the cyber word was even a word, is that we should have buildings. And some of the greatest architecture, if you look at books like California Crazy and other historic books of Los Angeles architecture, you saw Tale of the Pup, you saw Tommy's Stand. Those were little stands that they created in an image of what it was, because Los Angeles did not want to have, quote, street food. But now that street food is mobile, this is a very important impact that Mr. Corrett said as we look at it. So I think we have to look at everything from the safety standpoint and make sure that safety is number one, and also the public health, which is more important. That the county has, with the support of the community, has strongly endorsed the rating system.
Thank you. Right, and in that regard, you'll notice that in the report you have before you, there's a recommendation that this committee make a motion to adopt and incorporate the county's recent requirements
I make that motion.
rating. And so-
Separately? I could, Maria, write the motion.
It's one of the recommendations. I would suggest you, if you want the city attorney to go forward and draft the ordinance to do this and incorporate the issues that have been raised, approve the recommendations, and then they'll come back. I think 60 days is a bit ambitious because we would still need to meet with the stakeholders. So if it could be 90, we'll work really hard to make that happen.
So moved, colleagues. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but I want to get what Ms. Flores said. I want to make sure the county.
You can break that recommendation out and make a motion today to send that off to council so that those...
I move we break that recommendation out.
The whole thing should go.
I think we should get health first. Health is, we may not have this solved. If we could get health first.
Saying is he'd like to have the health part done now, not wait 60, 90 days in case it's an issue.
So I make a motion to do that.
Separate that out. I'll second the motion. Those in favor of that?
Aye. And then we continue the rest because we got work to do.
We'll bring the rest back after the first of the year at the rate we're going, okay? There was one more person before we take that official action. Someone by the name of Farmers. There he is. Yeah, because I know you came in and the card didn't get up in time. Before we take a formal vote on this, please, sir, your name for the record and good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm here as
your name for the record.
Yes, Faramaris Nabavi. I'm here as an LA City resident who has been a customer of food trucks and does support their existence, but I also want to express my support for council members' desire to do this right. And I think, number one of the things that Councilmember Labange mentioned, that there's a little bit of a difference between the loncheros who might be on private property or in established places versus, having a crowd of food trucks at one location on street parking. I think city staff should take into consideration traffic flow and congestion issues. And also, one thing that I haven't heard is in terms of SB 375 and how the city wants to look at this mode of food vending in terms of its greenhouse gas obligations. And finally, I think it makes sense for council members to be incorporated in the process in terms of identifying appropriate areas in their districts. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much.
You can do any of that in writing or cyber it to me if you want.
Okay, so just for the record, folks, what we're doing here today is continuing the item so we can go forward with the recommendations of proposing this sometime after the first of the year. I will say this to my colleagues and to the public. Food trucks are an exciting new addition and complement to brick and mortar, and they also are an exciting new addition to the new social media that we deal with. Never forget my first food truck thing all came about by the Twittering and the Facebook, and there were literally hundreds of people meeting each other for the first time in a sense of community. Second time I went over to the one near the beach. That was after the Clean Up the Bay Day, and again that was packed. So there's social pluses that come out of it. There's community pluses. We will obviously care about health and safety, and therefore we'll move forward. So if we could just make that motion again.
Yeah, one city attorney wants to say something. On the health issue, I move that we instruct the city attorney to move forward on the issue of the county health.
And I second that.
And that part can go directly to council? Will that work?
My concern is I would like all the recommendations to go to council so the city attorney has the direction of the full council to prepare the draft ordinance. Part of the county ordinance is that as well, and that will come quicker than 90 days.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll take the whole thing before the council in that regard and move with that, and so we can separate this out and go forward with it.
One other point.
We're moving forward, John White, City Clerk. To be clear, you're moving forward all recommendations of the CLA report.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, you adding my recommendations
That's
too?
already in there.
Does it say ask the city planning department?
The city planning department is identified as with the working group.
Okay, but does it ask the Department of Transportation to create space? Does it ask all those things that I mentioned? If you listen back to the tape, I would like them included.
We'll work on that.
In that.
We'll work on that.
Whatever I said on that, add it to
Let's
it.
make sure that is part of the recommendations that come back to the council for action.
Which will be sooner than later they get action for that.
All right, so we have one left, which is item number 4. People are picking up their bags to go. But let me just put this, that we're going to report back on the December 8th meeting, item number 4. But for the record, I'm going to put in some questions to have be part of the answers when you come back. And this is on item number 4. Maria, would you repeat what item number 4 is?
Item number 4 is the CAO report relative to the adopted expenditure guidelines and the 2010-11 adopted budget for the city's Measure Our Local Return Fund.
Okay, the questions that I want to put in the record that you'll get a copy of it, which I want the report back. And Mr. Parks has asked this also to come back on December the 8th, okay? Are there any specific project cash flow problems that require the use of Measure R funds? That's the first one. Second one is DOT is facing approximately $4 million budget gap this year. Is that correct? So we may be facing staffing reductions as possible. That could affect our ability to deliver existing capital projects. Is that correct? I'd like that answers back on that. You are currently working with DOT to identify a list of potential eligible capital projects that require funding on this. Do you anticipate that you will have enough clarity on these issues to provide a more comprehensive report back in 30 days? I'd be interested to hear back from DOT and CAO on our December 8th meeting with some clarity and further recommendations. On the bicycle and pedestrian set-aside, what is the status of the department's plan for the 10% set-aside for bike and pedestrian projects? I'm serious about getting that money and doing that for that. And the last question, what is the status of the $500,000 for Measure R administrative costs? Have additional positions been approved for this work? Okay, that's the questions, and we'd like a report back when you give it all on the December 8th meeting. Mr. Levon, do you have a motion to move that? Okay, and therefore we will bring that forward, and I'll just give you this.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl.
Are there any other public comment questions? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming. I was going to say Dr. Clyde Williams, but he already left. Maria? Maria, just put it all.